We got 30 seconds to get started. If you want to silence your phones.
All right.
Since it is semi-formal, I think we're not doing pledge of allegiance for this meeting. Good. All right, we're good to go. So, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Sunday, August 16th, 2023. This town hall meeting is one of 3 meetings this year. We'll have another one in the fall. And I guess first thing we'll start off with, we could recap some of the items that we covered last town hall meeting. We had a request on any action items. We haven't made any decision on any action items on anything to call out yet. Anything that was discussed today, we can also discuss whether or not this is something that the board should be considering. So let's start off with the first thing for this evening. I think we should start off with the looking at the recap. The update on the Foxbrook development, so we did cover that, that the property is not going to have a park. But I think there is an action item to that as to what's the disposition of that property going forward. So if the township is not using it, the residents have an interest in continuing to maintain the property, then there has to be some decision on that going forward. So is that something we want to cover in our an upcoming workshop? Where do we want the residents to raise that?
You talk about the note that's on the deed.
Yeah, so what's going forward with that?
That one.
Well, the property is just sitting there and it's not going to be a park. So right now the residents are maintaining that property, so is that
As
going
they
to
always
continue?
have them, right? It's part of their HOA, right?
Yeah, so is that the final disposition, that the township will still retain it, or the residents continue to maintain it?
Yeah, I don't know what we would have to discuss if it's already noted on the deed.
Is there any potential use for that property?
From the township standpoint, you mean?
Township or for residents have any input as well?
I thought they made their case that they didn't want to park, that's what
Correct.
I see here.
Yeah, well,
So what do you?
there's another possibility. You could have a solar farm, they could be putting up some solar panels and for the benefit of your development. I mean, it's up to the residents to make those choices, if that's something that they want to consider. So, but let's just make sure that if the deed stays with the township, the residents continue, the HOA will continue maintaining it. Let's just make sure we call that out. So if there's a
So then we're not we're not deliberating that tonight. We're gonna, you
Yeah.
wanted to know if we're gonna put that on a future.
I just asked if we want to put that on a workshop.
Right.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
That gives the residents a chance from that development if they want to come forward with any suggestions. And if it's a status quo, then that's we'll make sure that it's understood. Yes, Mike, go ahead.
I don't know, is the residents interested in buying the property?
That's a possibility, so that's where we can throw that out as well.
Buying it?
Sorry.
Buying it? No. Why would we want to buy something like that? Right? The only thing we're looking for is a document that says this belongs to Foxbrook. HOA.
All right. That's the thing, we have to make sure who retains the deed and who's going forward, who's maintaining the property.
And it's, the only reason for that is so that we don't have to run into this 10 years from now and say, okay, we're on to put a park in there, right? We want to make it so that, hey, this belongs to Foxbrook, and there's never any question that it's going to be developed by somebody else besides the Foxbrook.
All right, it sounds like we have an action item. Sal, go ahead.
So who, I don't know, man. So who's the deed to that, or how's the deed?
Township. Because that was part of,
The
Yeah.
township actually owns that piece.
Yeah, and it was buried in the office for years and passed from one board to the next. We weren't aware that the deed existed. Residents were taking care of it, and then all of a sudden it popped up in one of the meetings, looked at the property and said, whoops, township has the deed.
Wait a minute, is it deeded to the township? I thought that the township just had, according to the note on the deed, just had a legal right to take it over,
Yes.
to use this park.
Okay.
You are,
I don't believe that the township actually owns it.
All right.
That's not correct.
I'm sorry, what did you say, Tracy?
I don't believe
That's
the
all.
township actually owns it. The HOA owns it. The
Correct.
township doesn't own it, the HOA owns it. There's just a note on the deed that says the township can use it,
Can take dedication to.
can take dedication for parkland, because that would have been, at that time, most likely, some type of fee in lieu of, or some kind of a workaround if they didn't have recreational facilities. And so they said this open area can continuously be dedicated to the township for a park if they choose to do it. It's a note on the deed.
And
It's not owned by the township.
So I'll have to file right there. And, the residents, the pictures will come back and,
so basically, that's all it is some kind of document that says, hey, this is never gonna be used in the future. You know, that it's gonna be maintained and owned by Brook HOA.
so we'll bring that
So
over.
hang on, just so that I'm clear, you think that the township should create a document that says a property that's already has a note on the deed that says we're gonna just ignore that note on the deed that was put in
What do we want
place
to
when the
relinquish?
development was put
Okay,
in?
the
That's what
question
you're
is, do
saying?
we want to relinquish?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
That's,
Something like that. I don't know how that, officially works. I'm not in that capacity.
But the reason that note was put on the deed was because that developer got a waiver, because there isn't any recreation area in that development, right? Yes.
Yes. Well, I don't know. Again, I don't know. I wasn't a part of the, the planning of it.
so Zoom is not open, or was it?
No, she's trying to get on.
Okay. Showing that
So
the meeting's not.
I think we probably should talk about it, because I
Yeah.
think legally, if we were to allow a developer to just sort of not do anything, that would set a precedent for no recreation area in a development, wouldn't it? I mean, I don't know, I'm not aware, but.
Not for 25 years ago.
Yeah, that's the one.
Talking 25 years ago, that's, somebody can legally argue that that precedent is set over the last 25 years by no action by the township.
Did you have Warren? Or was-
Well, neither one of us are
Can you
really sure.
check Warren?
We'll let the lawyer figure it out.
Yeah, so we said all business on this, we just want to make sure that we have some understanding of going forward on that. All right. All right, intersection Chestnut Road 322. And would this be initiated, reimbursed with that?
I don't remember.
Okay.
Intersection Chestnut and 322. Oh, because we were asked to do some type of traffic study, but like we talked about, that intersection touches, what was it, 4 or 5 different municipalities, at least 3. So then, if Honeywell Township was to pay for the study, then what? We're paying for the study for the other 2 municipalities.
So you work with the other 2 municipalities.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be
Split it
any
three
one
ways.
township having to pay for it.
You have to have the other municipalities agree and want to do it and be amenable to it. You couldn't just say, here's a bill, pay it.
Yeah, it's the having a conversation. What it's about, having a conversation with other municipalities.
We need to initiate that conversation. Sure.
There's no trying to get in the way.
I thought that because of the development potentially going in,
Yeah.
if the developer potentially goes in, then the developer would already be responsible for doing that. Why would we let the developer pay for it if in fact that's going to happen? Why would would we pay for it? That doesn't make sense.
Because it's bigger than Hanover Road.
So you think
For
that
development,
if a developer to pay for it, you'd rather pay for it?
Why can't you ask the developer to reimburse you for it if they actually go in?
I don't know that you can legally do that. I don't know that you can pay a bill and then later on down the road say to a developer, hey, we already paid this bill, can you just give us the money back?
Could you hold that thought for a second? I have a comment over here.
Can you tell the developer or advise the developer or with the word I can't, in other words, he's doing whatever he's doing to come back again, obviously.
Yeah.
Can you require him that part of his submission is that he does the traffic study and that becomes part of his submission? So that that way, a part of the condition that he does the study to prove that his development is not going to impact. He has to go to traffic.
The way I understand it, if I understand it correctly, he already has to do that. It's already a requirement from what I understand.
Well, then if it's a requirement, you tell him he can't submit his plans until he has a report in hand.
Yeah, he has to have, that's part of his outlet. He has to have it done anyway.
Then he's paying for it, and no one
Right.
else.
Why would you?
Yeah,
We,
that's,
we know that there's already acknowledgement by PennDOT because we had a letter from January 20th, 2015 that was addressed to Tony Antonini. And the second paragraph says, our preliminary analysis based on the information data shows that traffic signals are warranted at Horseshoe Pike 322 and Chestnut Tree Road, State Road 4025. And then they went on to say further that, but not at Horseshoe Pike, State Road 4025 and Riddell Road. So there have been some, PennDOT did look at it a few years ago. And there was something on the list where potential project coming up. And I think that the funding wasn't there and it fell by the wayside. So that's going to come up again. Gary, you
So you have a letter from PennDOT that says that that intersection meets warrants for a traffic light? You don't show it to me, because if it meets warrants in the current condition, it's a guarantee it's going to meet the development.
yeah, it's supposed to
So does that mean you wouldn't have to read
came
it?
across, purging on the old files.
Right. What he's saying.
Yeah, so and put it like that, but it's like, wow, that's around the time it's as well.
That's 8 years ago.
Thank you.
So
8 years ago, there was nowhere near the traffic that's on that road now.
John Ryan.
Thank you.
Do you know what triggered this?
I think we may have spoken to Rich and Henderson.
I don't know how long.
Weren't they trying to put that,
That pretty much
Well,
says if it meets warrants, that's the only thing that'll stop the traffic. Because this doesn't meet warrants, you got a letter that says.
So Gary, you don't have to do another assessment after 7 years?
there's your answer.
Obviously.
The traffic doesn't go down,
I
so.
know.
But that's probably in your scope. That's probably, at some point, if the development moves forward, Mike Ryan's going to make sure, from the township standpoint, if PennDOT doesn't, that intersection is going to have to be in the scope of the study. Because they're exiting out on both roads that get to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
yeah, that's what I understood. They had to do it. It's already in scope.
Yeah, but what phase does that have to get done? I mean, how long in the process does that happen?
Well, where are they? I mean, they haven't been back to planning, so,
No, because they had to address those 36-page,
and try and figure out a way to not have any waivers.
They have an extension until November now.
So it should be in the preliminaries, it should be in the first, if, they should be doing their traffic study in the preliminary plan. The part of the preliminary plan, because that's gonna drive their entrance improvements, whether they have to have turning lanes or bypass lanes or whatever's gonna be required. So that would be foolish for them to wait until the final plan to do the traffic
So
study.
the next time they come to the planning commission, they should have.
They should have a pretty good idea what PennDOT's gonna require. And Mike, Mike may have already given his opinion of what needs to be included in the scope of the study. Yeah, you might be okay. I didn't realize you ever had a letter that said you had a warrant, that warrants are all like.
It's been sitting for a while, and yeah, just, as I said, going through some old files and said, wow, you missed that one.
I'm thinking your developer's gonna be putting a light in.
Yeah.
Yeah, my only concern is that it's gonna take so long just to get an assessment done.
Traffic studies, the traffic impact study doesn't, they can do that in 60 days, 90 days. It takes a long time to go through the pending process, that's what I hear now.
Does it?
I mean, to put it in.
To actually get the highway occupancy permit, and then from there, it's the way to get put in. What you want to do is make sure it's done in the first phase, so you get it up front.
Yeah, because the civil engineer has to do it right, then turns it into the engineer at PennDOT, and then they have to agree, and then they'll turn it back for comments, and then they have to agree. And every time they do that, it takes 30 days. Okay, because I had to get a highway occupancy permit, and every time one engineer sends it back to the other one, it takes 30 days for a response. That's how it works.
Yeah, they're running 14 months to the quickest.
Yeah, and it depends on how busy PennDOT is, right?
Next thing on here says, what is the Wetland Association qualification of Technicon, question mark? Step-by-step process, explain it.
I think that was because everybody was concerned about what was wetlands, but in the potential Arbor Glen, but I don't believe that that's even, they haven't called it out yet, what it is, right? That still hasn't been finished.
Well, the preliminary plan, they have to still come back with another one, isn't it? That's what it says?
Well, they're at the 36-page, Mike issued a 36-page follow sheet for them to follow,
Mhm.
and they're still working on that, and they asked for an extension, but that would be part of that. Their wetlands would be part of that, I mean, because they haven't actually finished it.
Did Technicon ask for the wetlands to be reassessed?
That's also, I think that the wetland delineation, the finalized wetland delineation is also part of SALDO, wouldn't that be part of SALDO?
That's when you
They to
have, the Army Corps of Engineers is the final wetland delineation.
Yes, that's the end of
permitting
it, right, but
process,
the developer would have to draw it up, and then the Army Corps of Engineers would have to agree with it or not.
Yeah, because they use a different classification system, and depending on who's evaluating, and there's different levels of assessments. And there's one level where they do a thorough walkthrough, and that could end up expanding the delineation area of the wetlands.
Nonetheless, it's getting done.
Well, did I just clarify
I don't
what the
know,
question?
I
Yeah, what
think the question
is?
was, how that process works maybe. Like, their engineer does it and then gives it to Technicon, Technicon gets somebody to look at it. I don't know, maybe that's what I meant by that. Maybe that's.
Right, if we're not clear on that, let's just move ahead, because there may be some new questions coming out. So, high-level explainer, police coverage. So, based on the last meeting, you had called out to me of the Council of Government, and I did bring it up, but the question I threw back to the board is, what level of coverage? I mean, when we say law enforcement, are we talking about full-blown police department, or are we just looking at an initial survey of what's available, or we have to be a little clear on that, because we can't, just go to the other municipalities and say, we want law enforcement.
Well, but we did go with it.
Where?
A few of us went to West Brandywine and talked
So-
to them about, and just, we were gathering information, that's
Yeah.
it. Because I had no idea,
Yeah.
because the study that had been done years ago
Right.
was a decade old.
Right.
And I thought we were gonna reach out and see what
Did you
information.
call Chief Keimer? Jeff Keimer? Because I left a message with him about 10 months ago just to tell him that we would be looking at law enforcement again. I said, we have no definite plans, nothing, just as a courtesy, because when we left it off with him 6 years ago, I said, if it comes up again, I'll just follow up and let you know there's this discussion going on. And then I had a discussion with one of the supervisors, Joe Morris, and he said, you know, we're welcome to reach out to Wallace Township to explore what their level of service, you know, to the other municipality is. So that's another avenue we have to look at. And that's something that can be brought up at the COG meeting.
Can we, I mean, there's been various people that have shown up to township meetings that have law enforcement backgrounds.
Yes.
Can we utilize some of those people? Because, I mean, for
Yes.
anyone who's not in law enforcement, there's just so many things that we're going to be missing on points that we need to consider and things that, you
And
know.
the prices keep escalating for everything, including law enforcement. Steve Jones offered, he said, anytime, just give him a call, he'd be willing to step in, sit down with us for a few meetings, whatever, you know, so he's amenable to it. There's another police officer in my neighborhood, and he said he would be willing to help out. A few years back, Bill Cahill, if you remember Bill. So there are a few officers out there that said that they would be willing to help out. Yes. Question? Yes, go ahead.
This is like really a dumb question, but, because I didn't live here when they had the police before, but I guess this would be like a right to know form to the township that I have to submit. It's like, when they disbanded the police, did the township taxes go down at that point? And if they didn't, then why would they need to go up? If you had police and you didn't drop the taxes when you stopped paying them, then why would you have to increase it?
I think we've got a brief rested on the taxes for a year or two, if my memory's correct, around 2005, 2006, and then then within a few years before we were on the board, the taxes were back up to, you know, the level where we were paying for a police department, but we were not getting the police coverage.
When did the police stop?
2005.
Oh, I wasn't here, that's right. Okay, no, I moved to your center.
So where
Yes,
were these
ma'am.
funds?
Just clarification, the person that we met, two people we met with in West Virginia, one is a long-term resident.
You're sitting in the middle, you're sitting in the middle.
Richard Craig, so he's not only a police officer, but he's also
Yeah.
lives in our
Was he part of
community
our police department?
Yes.
and was part of our police department. So I don't know what more buy-in you would need from somebody giving you information if you think you're getting false information or something.
Well, yeah, it's just, really comes down to pricing
I
around.
think what it comes down to is the money part.
Yeah.
If we're willing to pay the money, then we move forward and that's what we do. If we're not willing to address that, then
Well,
I
it was,
think, just from their point of view, now, again, we have some plans to meet with some other people. But from a tax level and a cost level, it's kind of really the determination between the residents. As far as talking about West Brandywine and what they offer, it's a pretty simple solution.
Why
So for
wouldn't
that
we
dollar,
involve other people in the community in
I'm
the
sorry,
discussion?
for that $107 that we're dealing with is a full coverage.
can you
I'm
answer?
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Can you answer her question?
Can you,
I sure can. I just was in the middle of explaining myself, that's all.
Okay.
Why would you involve other community members in this discussion that have law enforcement background, that know the different issues and things to consider?
Because the person that we met with who lives in the community has a police background, is currently a police officer,
So one
has been
person,
yeah, it's one person.
All right, as far as, what I'm hearing so far, I mean, it really comes down to defining what the need is, and once we have the need, then we have to determine what that price is, and the last question, can we afford it? That's really where we're at this point. So if we're looking to contract services, if that's the direction that the township feels, I mean, we do have to consider what enforcement is needed. You know, 9 to 5 weekdays or something like that. I mean, that's something we can knock out in a meeting or two, and then come up with an announcement and say, this is what we'd like to propose. Timing-wise, it's probably good with the 2024 budget coming up right now. And I think we might want to consider including Hunter Borough, since they are providing some level of coverage. Go ahead, yeah, something else?
And as the meeting when I spoke of that, and I'll make it clear, clarify it again, it was a fact-finding meeting that in no way, shape, or form am I suggesting that we do one thing or the other, or trying to persuade one side or the other, or one department or the other. It was clearly because it's been talked about and talked about and talked about. We ended up talking with it's Mr. Craig there, and then we put this meeting together, and that's the facts. It wasn't verbal, the stuff's written, so they had preparation of the facts of PSP, the dollar amounts, the liability, the sample contract that we used. So again, all that is just facts. It's obviously up to the township and the people of the township to make that decision. I just didn't want to be construed that I'm on a mission here to do something. There's the facts and deal with West Brandywine.
And
When I get more facts from other places, I'll bring you the facts, and then you guys can examine it and move forward as such.
For your benefit, Jeff will present it to us, and it's outdated, of course, but at least it provided, the level of services that they can provide, maybe it's a duplicate of what they presented. And we do have I think we still have a copy in the office. Do you want to check on that?
It was a basic form that they gave us. It wasn't like specifically for honey. This is what we offer to Wallace. This is what we did with Wallace. This is how we started out with Wallace. This is what we now do with Wallace. Here's some of the facts that we can do with you. Here's what we can offer. Take it or leave it. We would like to work with you, but this is what we offer. So it was probably very similar to this.
It was pretty much like an à la carte.
Yeah.
If we only wanted traffic, we only wanted patrol, you say how many hours a week you want,
Yeah.
based on the hourly rate, that includes, the wages, the insurance, the pension. And this is for contract police work. This is for, this is what they started with Wallace. They started with 20 hours a week, traffic control. And now they're 24/7. And it evolved over 7 or 8 years based on what their needs were. But what he was pretty much saying was, and we asked him, do you have the staffing to take on another township? And he said, if you're just looking for, traffic control and you can pretty much pinpoint where you want it or have, specific areas, that we're pretty sure they could cover that. If we look for more and decide we want more services, then they may have to hire another officer, but it just depends. But, but at the end of you do a year contract, at the end of the year contract, if we're unhappy with the service or they're unhappy with us for some reason, either side can give a 60-day notice and you split, you walk away. We're not responsible for any future pension payments, anything like that. So we're not on the hook to continue disability, pension, everything for the rest of the police. That's pretty much what, but I'm sure that the hourly rate is much higher now than what it was back in 2015 or whenever that study was done. So that's all we got. That's what the information is we got.
And we attended the COG meeting way back when Ron Husband presented back in Callan Township. And we did have three other municipalities who were interested in sitting down with us. But it turned out that we only sat down with 2 other municipalities. So if we bring it up again at the COG meeting, we may end up with someone like West Carolina to step up and say, we're interested in working with you. So we can see, yes.
When's your next COG meeting?
It's the last Wednesday, and it's, we're rotating the
I know
locations.
out.
Yeah, last Wednesday, 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock?
And there's Zoom meetings, so if
Where's this coming?
Yeah,
I have a hard
Earlier
time
in the
finding
year.
tracking it down because of.
yes, early in the year, we were at Valley Township, and then we went back to what I initiated a few years ago, where every month we went to a different location. We hosted at Huntingburg Township one time, so I have to check. The meeting invite will be going out probably next week, so I can forward that to you if you want.
Please.
So we're missing the first part of this story, which is what kind of police enforcement do we need? So there has to be an analysis of, over time, has there been a certain region that's been affected? What do we need? Do we need traffic enforcement? Do we need, preventative policing to prevent break-ins and that kind of stuff? So we need to look and see what the need is to know, do we need 24/7? Is it only happening from mostly 8 till 5? You know what I mean?
Well,
Can't
to
make
your point,
decisions until you know that.
we do get, a report, a monthly report, and it shows, over 100 different items that have been reported. Some of them are false calls, and, it blends in just about everything. At one point, I tried to pull together, some of those stats and find out, like, what's, how many, is burglary the most pressing thing? But the thing is, it was all paper copies, so we really need the data, otherwise we're sitting there manually trying to figure
And
it
I
out.
don't know if you can get where it's happening, like, is there one particular region of the
Yes.
township that there's more issues than the other?
Okay. We checked with the Emeryville, and if I'm sure that they're keeping stats, and if they're willing to give us a report.
It could be that contract work, it would be fine,
Yeah.
and you just need it concentrated in a certain area. I mean, I don't know, but I'm sure there are pros and cons to the different types of
Yeah.
law enforcement, the regional, having your own contracting. And that's where it would be helpful to get that input from people with a law enforcement background and not have it come through somebody else in the room, have them come here so we can hear that.
We did have several reports generated, but yes, the information is outdated. But occasionally we would have a police officer from the state police will come in and, field questions from us, and for instance, one of the questions I asked about, has he seen a reduction in speeding on 322 by lowering the speed limit to 45? And he said it really didn't have much of an impact, other than some people are not happy that we lowered it down to 45. But before I get you, Sal, you said you have...
Yeah, just so, in talking with West Brandywine, their comment to that, because we asked that question, and I didn't examine this, but their comment was PSP will give you the breakdown like you all supply in the agenda, but they won't go any further than that.
They don't? Okay.
They refuse to, for several different reasons, but they won't give you specifics. They'll give you that calls and the amount, just like what we see. But he said you can reach out, and depending on who you talk to, he said you may luck out with somebody, but every time that we've tried it and worked with different people, you won't get that. The other thing that he said was same questions like Val just brought up. What they found and what Walls found was just having a police presence with the traffic, and that's what they suggested, creates that presence that they start to see some type of decline, because now you see cops. And you don't know what the police are doing because they're just police. But really, you're telling them, let's just say, like Laura said, we want you 6 hours a day to be on traffic. But we also want you to take 2 hours, or we want you to take 4 hours Friday and Saturday night and keep an eye on our parks. They can split it up like that. The bad guys don't necessarily know that you're just doing traffic, or what you're doing, or when you're doing it. So you can split it up, and as long as it's kind of within that time frame and situation, they can work with you on how you want to spread that out, how you think.
Yeah, I guess my question is I like the a la carte idea, right? But does that mean you have to wait until the end of the contract, or say we're in month 3 and say, we really missed the ball on this, right? We not only need traffic, we need something else. Are they amenable to making a change during mid-contract? So if we do end up going a certain way and it's not right, then it gets adjusted. And I see your shaking head, yes, so.
It is, yeah, they can modify
So
it.
open-ended, yeah.
It's an open end, and
Good.
as long as they have the staff for the additional services we may want from them, then, they can.
Yeah, but my assumption is, like you said, right, if they feel that they need to hire somebody because we're asking for more, I assume they go out and hire, right? As long as we're financially covering whatever the cost is for that.
That's one of the problems in Pennsylvania. We have the highest number of part-time officers than any other state. And that's because we have a lot of small municipalities can't afford a full staff. You have another point?
So, yeah, just a quick response. So your contract would spell out all these specifics that you want. And the suggestion in the common sense would tell you, we're going to put in that contract, or you would put in that contract, dealing with traffic, dealing with calls, cover it all. Make sure that your ordinance, because now you're going to come back and develop an ordinance within your township, and you want your ordinance to cover the same exact language, because if your ordinance doesn't reflect that same language, you could get into a legal issue of what legally that police person is supposed to be doing. So if your ordinance only says that they're dealing with traffic, and they happen to go to a burglary, and there's a shooting or whatever it rolls into, then you potentially have some liability.
Yeah.
So as long as everything is covered, he said, and you would be, quote unquote, kind of stupid not to, cover it all, your ordinance, your contract, then you dictate, in this specific case, whoever we decide is going to be the liaison between us and West Brandywine. You would communicate to them and say, we're going to start out with 8 hours of traffic every day. Or we're going to start out with 4 hours of this and 4 hours of this. So it's pretty much my understanding is on the basis of it's an 8-hour shift. You can't kind of like do, well, we're just going to do 1 hour a day. So there's kind of that minimum. So when I brought up that minimum of 317,000, I believe the number was, that's kind of your minimum start line. If you want to add to that, you can go full blown regional with them. But at that point, he said, when you get to that point, they're going to want buy-in. We're going to buy some police cars. Do you have to look at property? Do you have to expand property? So there's just a lot more to that. There's training, and there's equipment. There's just a lot more costs. But if you're doing maybe one or two police shifts, probably a whole lot of change for them.
So are there notes available about this conversation that the residents can see and refer to?
Well, let's get to the point of moving forward on this. What we did a few years ago, we had a resident who had the time to step up. He made the initial contact with Harrisburg, initiated a study, and this was based on a regional police department. We used that report as the basis of meeting with West Brandywine and Huntingburg Borough, and we committed to, 18 months or a 2-year period, and to hash out and to understand, what the options are. If there's 4 or 5 options, what they are, and one of the options could be we don't do anything at all. But the one thing that motivates people every 2 years or so is when a new legislative session comes up and some politician in Harrisburg decides to charge for the state police services, and it starts getting some momentum, but it's always died in committee. It's never reached the floor. So that's one thing. A possibility we could end up, and then what gets people's attention, we see an article in the Daily Local saying Harrisburg is considering, that municipalities pay for state police coverage. And that's what gets people coming in here asking about it. So we just have to, at some point we have to say, what's the first step? The first step, I think, would be that we have someone in the community step up as a point of contact, whether it's a board member, a resident, or both, or whatever way we want to do that, and then say by the end of the year, lay out exactly what we're going to do over here in 2024. And that would be recommendations. If they come up with recommendations and get them into the 2024 budget, we can move forward in 2024. Otherwise, we're looking at 2025. To fund something like
I
that.
would just appreciate it if it would be opened up to other residents with law enforcement background.
Well, yes, we do have, like I said, we have a few people who have stepped up and said that they would volunteer to help out. I wouldn't want to miss out on their experience and their input. Okay? Any other comments on the law enforcement? Yes, Susan.
Well, if we went the contract route for whatever services, what happens to the state police numbers that we have now?
They would just adjust. They may do evening coverage and weekends while we do, whatever hours that we have coverage for. Is that correct?
So PSP, let's just say we have a contract with West Brandywine and we're engaged. When West Brandywine takes over, they call in to let them know I'm on service. So then this system, the 911 system, the area, et cetera, knows that West Brandywine's on. And they could be on just for traffic. So if there's a break-in, PSP is automatically going to get that call because the central station already knows West Brandywine is dealing with this, call PSP. So whatever coverage West Brandywine, whatever coverage we decide West Brandywine or whatever police force is not covering, PSP automatically is alerted to in the system, and that automatic is, it's like programmed in, there's no guessing about it.
But at the same time, we've heard from the chief of Huntington Borough Police that he's covering and his staff are covering calls that the state police can't get to.
They get to the scene ahead of time, and then the state police, I guess, will pick up when they arrive. But then again, there is a problem where there's only one state police patrolman available. He may be down the road and something else happens in the township. So then if it's serious enough, the borough has been coming into it, especially for the park. Yes?
Yeah, so I'm probably late to the party with this question, but why don't we work with the borough on this problem?
We did.
Seems like the most
We've
logical
had
thing.
discussions, but it really comes down to, there's a sentiment in the township that the level of crime and stuff that we're having in the township, and the cost of bringing in the police department and the coverage that we're getting from the state police right now and somewhat of the trade-off, because the acquisition cost for the police department would be highly exorbitant, But
they're funding it, the borough's funding it themselves for what
they
they
have their own,
have.
and they recently hired another officer, and they had to raise taxes to accommodate that.
Yeah, I don't know if the borough really has the staff to do anything with township about it, whether they have 1.5.
I don't know what the
I
current
think
staffing
they
is
might
at this
only
point.
one cop, maybe?
And we have a finger right now, and I'm not sure who else is on the staff.
Yeah, I don't know that they have the staffing.
More full-time, yeah.
What if another department has to hire someone, couldn't the borough just hires?
Well, another thing too is the availability of police officers. It's getting harder and harder to find people who are willing to do police work. And especially out in the rural areas, the pay is not always attractive. I mean, we went through the same thing in New Jersey. I knew the commandant of the New Jersey Police Academy, and he spelled it out for me. He said that the smaller the municipality, the less experienced cop is what usually gets attracted. They get the lower pay, and he says in some cases, they're not really up to the job, but they have to take what they get. And the cream of the crop will go to, the mainline communities. And also sometimes you see, just like in other things, the person comes to one of the municipalities out here and gets experience, and then now they have the experience, they're going to go on, and just like in corporate America.
And you're exactly right, because that's the conversation that we had with the chief.
Yeah.
And he says it takes him a lot of time to root through and get a certain type of individual that's
Psychological profile,
and all these things.
yeah.
It's extremely hard to keep. And exactly what you said about they get some experience behind them and they move up bigger thing.
All right, so, yes,
One last question on this a la carte thing. I'm sorry I'm harping on it, but kind of like what I'm hearing.
yeah.
How do they validate back to us that, say we have a contract with them where they give us 8 hours of support a week? How do we validate that so that we're not just handing the money and not getting the services that we're requesting?
I would say there's running stats that over a period of time that flatten out and show, the
What did they
impact.
say when you guys were there?
Well,
There's a
we would specifically ask for a certain number of hours
Mhm.
for a service. I mean, I mean, are you asking for a time card? I don't know, like,
I just wanna know, if we say,
Well-
if we tell them, hey, you want a cop here, 8 hours, of just say as an example, 10 hours would make it easy, right? How can they prove to us that that police officer is doing 10 hours worth of work in the township?
Well,
They can give you a 911 printout if you so choose that would legit validate, I guess, when they were clocked in and when they were clocked out. Doesn't mean that they would have service calls or whatever between that time, but it's tracked through the 911 system, it's tracked, there's a system there, so when they're on service, they have to report Sergeant so-and-so or the car number or whatever is on service. So
That's
there's a uniform process there.
It would be nice to have that baseline so we could see, you
Yeah.
know, is that law enforcement
Well,
8 hours a day?
when we did discuss this a few years ago, Walt was the police chief back in the day, and he said that the statistics that we have is based on what's reported. So he said that, like the vandalism and stuff like that, some people are like, it's not worth calling the cops, I'll just take it to the shop and get it painted over. So that's another factor too. And, the earlier point you made, on-site enforcement, when you have a policeman staying on the street corner, there's no crime on that street corner, but around the corner, if there's no cop, that's where you have to worry. Go ahead.
So, I live in Watts Township, and a couple town meetings that I've been to, I don't exactly know which ones, because it was a couple years ago, but there was always a police officer that's usually patrolling the area, and he has a report, and he prints out and has available for everybody at the meeting, that has all the calls and different things that he did.
That would be great to have someone from Wallace come here and talk to us about that and what their experience has been.
Well, I live right in the village, and we have West Brandywine, and everybody's been pretty good. Police officers are there to make the regular trips.
Their
If you
response
call-
time's good.
Yeah, if you call, because there's a mail truck that drives through, that does 70 down through the village. He's there every day at 4:30, flying through. When you call them and tell them, the next day they're sitting there at the deli or at the church, watching for them. So they are.
Do you know how they deal with fines and everything?
I think
Trying to stay
The
away.
fines that would be collected, the fines that are collected in Wallace Township gets that money. So Huntingburg Township would get those fines. If they were, now not where they ended, but if the offense was done in the township and they chased them over the Lancaster County line, that fine still comes to this township.
Well, that's more.
One quick note too, in talking with the chief, which I thought was just a nice thing, they would come to the meetings, our meetings,
Yeah.
and give you an update of, because the PSP is only giving you totals. That chief will give you more detail because he can and he will. So if he's hearing this or seeing this, he'll give you more than that PSP will.
Yeah, and as a courtesy, they have been providing some coverage on Icedale Road. Sometimes there's stuff going on back there, and they've been cooperating with us for a while. So if I did hear an action item, I mean, do we have direction on this with a resident, with a partner, with a board member? I mean, we bring that up in the next workshop meeting, make that decision for our September meeting, and then, for the last quarter of 2023, set a goal and say, do we want to go this direction, that direction, do we need some more time to figure things out? Because if we can get something decided in 2023, it's possible to get something on the budget.
And see if the township can get more information from the PSP about,
Yes.
incident issues, like regionally where it's happening, times, whatever. Maybe it's overnight, maybe it's just during the day, but it would be nice to know what type of law enforcement is needed.
Yes. All right. Last call. Good. Okay. Susan, did that answer your question? Sort of, okay. Comp plan 2015, so, yeah, I think that would be another thing that we need to step up on because it is starting to get dated on what we did a few years ago, a group of residents, and whether we're going to contract with a land trust or who we're going to work with to help us do organizing that comp plan. So is that something the board would be interested in moving on in the fall?
I think we have to,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Because-
more than 7 years now.
Right.
Yeah.
John, can I just,
Go ahead.
sorry, I don't mean to eliminate, but, I went down to Downingtown
Yes.
Borough
Mhm.
last night. They had a pizza party at Victory Brewery. It was actually open to anybody in the area. They didn't care if you were a borough resident or not. They wanted your input. Gary was asking me if I could get the information about the firm that's doing their comp plan. I have all that stuff. I'll email it to you guys, but, they are an engineering firm out of like the Allentown area. I guess they got grants, Downtown Borough got grants, and she said if I email her, she can give me all of the funding opportunities that we can look into to pay for, a firm like theirs to help with this. She's a land planner. But they came up with, she said their planning commission does their comp plan. And then they have community meetings to get input, and then they have this, it's a phenomenal survey. The survey, you could go there for this pizza party, and I think they also had it at Good Neighbor Day. There's a QR code that you could scan and answer the questions on there all electronically, or they had paper copies there for people to fill out. They've had, in a month and a half, they've had 1,000 residents answer it, which I think for a survey is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
But they had their downtown business association and their council members like really pushing this hard. They were putting it on their community page. And the questions were phenomenal, like asking, what types of services, would you like to see more of? Would you like to see, more restaurants, more shops? What are you most concerned about? Like they put flooding on there a lot because that is a big issue in downtown. So you can customize it for your community and see, instead of all of us projecting that, people want a skate park or people want this or that, this is actually put out to the entire community and everyone gets a chance to answer. Now, granted, survey response rates are not always great, but, if you really put it out there and people really push to get that feedback, I think that could be really valuable. So I can get copies, I forgot to bring it tonight, of all of that, but it sounds like if you have to get funding opportunities, and I think you said before, bringing on Conservancy help with that.
Conservancy they got the funding for Chester County Planning, I believe is where the money came from.
So I don't know if this firm does that, if they help write those grants, or, we would have to write those grants and send them in, and I don't know how long that process takes. So I guess it might be helpful to get started on that sooner than later to look at what types of funding.
Okay.
Another comment about the comp plan.
Yes, go ahead.
How much was that used in the last 7 to 8 years since it was written?
Yes.
How often was it being looked at?
It's hard to tell when you have a paper copy. And the one thing that I felt that was really lacking, we have all these action items and status, so we don't know if any of those action items have been initiated and been completed.
Well, that's what I was getting to, that there was this rather long list. And I brought this up in planning commission meetings, and I was basically told to sit down and shut up, and the board of supervisors will let you know if they need you to do anything.
That's not what I hear.
It's not right, but
The
it's still what I was told.
the comp plan is really, the guidance
It's a
document.
guiding document,
Yeah.
but nobody looks at it, and like strategic plans in all kinds of organizations that are written, money spent on them, they sit on a shelf, and they don't do any good. So, I'm not sure how much good the last one did.
Yeah, I can tell you, I did come across something on page 125 concerning wetlands and stuff, so I've actually read some of it, but the problem is, the writing style on that is hard to read. I mean, there's some stuff there that I have some knowledge, and I'm reading through it, and I'm saying, John Thurlock, what were you trying to get across on this one? I think the level of writing, he was writing more towards, almost like a college class, which was great. It had some wonderful information in there. But the thing is, if you're not well versed in like ecology, wetland science and stuff, it's hard to follow some of that stuff. So we have to have and then the same thing with the land preservation document. I mean, I said at one point, forgive me, but I said dummy it down to like an 8th grade level, not because I was insulting the residents. I'm saying I'd like to have something where you just sit down, flip through it, 12, 13 pages, and you say, oh, I got it. And then if you really want, then you go into the appendix and then get into some of the details. And at least you have that cover piece that really explains more of an executive level type of thing that's right to the point. And then people say, now I get why we have a conflict. I understand it. Now I understand why we have a land preservation document. And some of those things would be great. If you're having insomnia, put it by your table and by page 10, it will work like a charm.
Okay, you really didn't answer my question about
Okay.
the task list.
Yes.
How often has that been looked at and
Yeah.
addressed? What have we accomplished? What do we still need to do?
Yeah.
And has that information been shared?
Yeah. So,
I would say no.
That, you really need to challenge your manager. That's, the manager's your paid employee. That's really his job to say, and you're right, Susan, there was a lot of action items. And the one I think that only got implemented was the zoning changes that were recommended. But I think you asked, in this case, Warren, to follow those actions items and bring them to the appropriate, in most cases, it is the supervisors. But you're right, I don't think a lot of things.
I know, and it was a lot of work. It was 2 years of work that he worked on. And if we're going to go and do this again for another 10 years, I think there needs to be a commitment that it's going to be a document that's actually used.
I look at it as the board of supervisors own the strategic view, the vision and all that. Then you break it down to the operational level. That's where the tactical level, where you have the township manager has those action items that are built out of those tasks from those different vision statements or what were included.
Well, almost every one of those action items did have an assignment of individuals or committees.
Yeah, so BOS, borough, and it had like ongoing, immediate, and all those different things, yeah. And another thing, if we had an electronic copy of it, we could have just done a filter and say, okay, BOS, immediate, there's 5 things that we should be working on instead of going page 52,
So where
page
is it?
54.
It was digitized.
It's right in the comments.
Yeah.
But it was digitized.
Well, now you've got
document.
Yeah, now the document, but I don't think the tables are where you can pull those, and filter them out. You need the Excel spreadsheet.
Oh, they're not, they weren't workable documents.
Yeah.
Or they weren't workable spreadsheets. They were just PDFs.
Yeah.
But for the most part, PDF can be put in.
Yeah, it can be
Excel,
converted to a Word or Excel
description,
spreadsheet.
and you're set, you may have to change a thing here and there, but for the most part, that's a pretty big task.
So what I'm hearing is that, yes, we want to see the comp plan, but we want to make sure that we get value out of it, that it's not just a collection of thoughts and that the action items are actually thought through.
So maybe even make another part of the agenda, your once in a quarter meetings, to say, hey, let's take a look at,
Well,
here, Warren, where are we with this?
we didn't have that about 10, 12 years ago. So by the time Steve Lance came on board, I asked him to include in the manager's report goals. and we haven't been there. The only problem is he created a list, but that list became just as static as the list in the comp plan. We weren't getting the updates on, and sometimes these goals that we stated in the manager's report were in the January report, and we were still in the December report. So we weren't seeing some action on some of that. Is that your understanding of what we saw in those manager reports? That sometimes we had these lists of goals, but we just weren't seeing any results.
Are you talking recent or back?
I'm saying, well, we only have 2 years, but yeah, problem is on some of those manager goals, they're just being carried over from month to month.
Well, we had a lot changed from before Steve to Steve, and now we have, you know,
Yeah.
touch on that.
But we have to make sure that, as I said, when we have those things called out on the manager report, that we do have some follow-through. Did I see a hand? No.
I think, John, what you need to do, I think, not John, but I think what you all need to do is, I wouldn't dwell on what wasn't implemented or
Yeah, well, yeah.
just maybe you learn from it.
Right.
But the first thing was maybe have Warren look into some possible grants that are out there.
Yeah.
And then you ought to start a timeline right now and say, we want to determine where we can get grants, and then if you're going to go to an outside consultant, and then develop the questionnaire like Valerie found that she played Downingtown resident. That's a good idea. That's a good starting point. But I think if you're going to fund it, if you want to fund it from grants, that's step number one.
They actually wanted feedback from other surrounding
I was just
municipalities.
kidding.
I just think it's something to consider too, that, you know, you can reach out to other communities and make sure that because they get impacted too.
Is this picking up on the camera? Okay.
And I like the fact that we have a joint comp plan.
Yeah.
And we should reach out to the borough, because chances are we're going to do better with grant opportunities because it is a joint comp plan as opposed to just a single municipality. And make sure they're willing to proceed as well.
Yeah.
Because the joint agreement is only as good as the length of the comp plan.
I think we pretty much covered what was passed. New questions? Yes?
You weren't here last week, but I brought something up, and since the budget's coming up, I'd
Yes.
like the board to visit this idea. So I'm concerned about the money that was pulled from the land preservation along with multiple people. So I'd like to see how much of that money can go back from Parks and Rec back into the land preservation fund. Because that money was allocated for that. And that's what the taxpayers agreed to use that money for.
That discussion happened last night. So I think that's something we want to add to our next workshop.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're on 9 to 5 for the workshop in September. Just a brief step back, we have, let's see, workshop follow up on the Foxborough property, law enforcement, September workshop, comp plan, September workshop, and continuation of the comp plan, looking at grants, working with the borough, the survey, and, all right, land preservation. Anything here from last night's meeting? Yes, Susan.
This came up in the discussion last night about there really isn't good interaction between planning commission, land preservation, and Parks and Rec. And there are a number of issues that do overlap, but the committees, planning and recreation do get together once.
Yes.
But there isn't a lot of interaction. What can we do to change that?
Well, one of the suggestions we had was to have a person on multiple committees, as you do, you're on planning and land preservation. At one point, we're trying to recruit someone from land res or park and rec to be on both committees so that we have it. So when something comes up, you have somebody that can say, we met last week, that's what we discussed. That would help that flow. But when you talk about going across, like reaching out to all the committees at the same time, that's pretty difficult. I mean, planning, as you know, is pretty well focused on certain issues and things like that, unless there's something in the land preservation that would be impacting something planning commission is doing right now. And you want to call some, well, in your case, you're present, but there might be something from Park and Rec that you want to call somebody from that committee to attend the planning commission meeting, if not just call in at least on the Zoom meeting. That might be a way. I think some of the, I'm speaking for some of the committee people, that they're willing to help out, but it just gets to a point. I mean, you've been doing 14 years on planning alone, and let's take the time to say thank you very much. I mean, that's incredible contribution that you've given, but it's sometimes tough for that person to go beyond that one committee and to be participating in another committee or joining into multiple meetings.
I understand that. I understand that everybody's got a lot going on.
Yeah.
But how could our township manager help facilitate communications between three committees?
We do have in the Board of Supervisors department reports. That's one way to get those updates. We used to have on a consistent basis Parks and Rec. Teresa Maltzline was doing that for 10 years. Land preservation, Chip, and sometimes Shane have been stepping in, and I think you've been called on at times. Gary and others have been attending from planning, but mostly Mike Ryan gives those updates. So I mean, that's one way to cross over to people from the other committees to find out what's going on by hearing at the Board of Supervisor monthly meeting. Yeah. So, but I don't know if that's sufficient.
What do you, I mean, other than communication, there has to be some sort of structure of why the three boards, or in this case, the three would meet together. I mean, just
I didn't say that they had to meet together. I was talking about communication, so that one hand knows what the other hand is doing.
I think the point
Because
that was
I
carried out was
understand
that
everybody's busy, they work during the day, and
land preservation was saying we didn't know there was more money that's being taken out for Parks and Rec. Park and Rec said we didn't know land preservation wasn't aware of it, but that was that one particular issue. That was a very serious issue. And then the complaint was, why weren't we talking across?
Well, if a committee has an issue, shouldn't they, that addresses another committee, shouldn't they send it to the manager and let the manager get it on the agenda?
well, that's what I just suggested, that there would be some way, and I'm not saying what it is, leaving that open to discussion or creative thought, how the manager, who's here every day, could facilitate the connection between those three committees.
They could have where we can have a monthly call. The chairman of each committee calls in like once a month to the manager. That's a possibility.
Or turn it the other way, have the manager reach out.
Yeah.
And say, hey, we got a planning commission meeting, we got Park and Rec coming up. Got anything you need to get on the agenda for them?
Or anything important that was discussed at that Park and Recs can be then transferred to, land preservation. So, like, he's kind of the, coach, field and everything, and
Right.
letting everybody know what's important.
Question over here?
Not to overcomplicate, but we're kind of sort of down that path with your Board of Supervisors meeting. Don't you have for each committee?
Yeah, the
Parks and
report.
Rec has, what planning has. But I think that would be a great opportunity that if you have an issue at that point,
Yeah.
to bring up in front of everyone.
Yeah.
And from whether the Board of Supervisors or the manager to maybe get with the different committees and you can't name somebody, but hey, it behooves you guys to have at least a representative talk about something in your meeting that you had to force that communication process, so you ain't relying on one person talking to another person. Do it in front of the meeting. That's what we're all here for.
Well, when we do the consent agenda, that's when we do,
Right.
15, 20 reports all at once, including all the committee reports. But the one good thing that's progress we've made has been with moving to electronic or the digital world at this point, because we were relying so heavily on paper for years. And now you can go on campus and you can go back 2 years on meeting minutes and agendas and post it. So that helps. And yes.
Where I used to work, which was a lot bigger, but when they had the planning commission, they had some board members who were required to attend from the different committees. So when we had planning commission, we had someone there from Park and Rec, we had someone there from EAC, Environmental Advisory Committee that we had someone there from land planning, all this. And then they took anything, Park and Rec, anything that would possibly affect their individual thing, back to their committee, and gave a report, and then at the next meeting, and then they also spoke it up at the commissioners meetings, but there was always somebody from each of the different committees, or boards, commissions, at the main ones, so that they could say, well, what did Park and Rec think about this? They said, well, they didn't like this, they'd like to see this. It was something to take it back. There was a lot of back and forth, but that way you heard from somebody from each of the boards who had reported it back to their board, and in turn brought it back to the planning and the commissioners and supervisors.
The other problem is getting people to actually read this stuff. I was in a class one time where the instructor wrote, if you have read this far, I'll pay you $5. Only 3 of us responded in the whole class. So that was one way to find out who was actually reading the syllabus and stuff in class. One last point, financials, that's another thing that we're not providing good financial reports in some of these committees, so that they should be on top of what's going on currently. And I mean, what we saw last night listed as the financial report was a spreadsheet, a tracking spreadsheet, not a financial report. And that's something that we can easily go to campus and go to the budget and then see that particular account and see what's in plan present, what's in
Do they get one every quarter? Because that's what they were saying, when they meet every quarter to consider.
I know from my experience years ago, we really had to push hard to get any financials. So what we did is we summarized the financials in our meeting minutes, and then confirmed that we had, for land preservation, not just the bank balance, but the available funding for easements. So we were distinguishing that. Because that was the sticking point we had years ago. And that was the purpose of that spreadsheet, to keep track of that.
I think that back, however many years ago that was, it was maintained by Chip Jones on the committee. Right now, it's maintained here in the office.
Yeah, I created the spreadsheet, handed it to Chip. At one point was not getting the updates from the treasurer, so that's when I handed it off to Jackie Smith. Then Jackie.
Yeah, we decided that it was too important.
Yeah, that-
Get on the office, not give it to volunteers.
Because Chip would come back and say, John, I haven't heard in two months. Yeah. So that made sense, keep it in-house. All right. I think it was a productive meeting tonight. Anything else? All right. I mean, it's great, so many people coming out in the summertime for a meeting like this.
I'd like to say that I thought this meeting went very well.
Good.
I mean, there's a lot of back and forth, and that's, to me, is how it should work.
Good. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you. It's
I mean,
That's
we all
all
live
purpose.
here, we're all a community, we all have to get along and voice, we
Yeah.
all have different opinions and different wants and needs, but,
And sometimes we feel like we're on the other side of the world, but we're on the other side of Route 10.
Yeah.
And sometimes they give directions And people who have lived here a number of years, I say, you know the old monkey farm? They go, oh, I know exactly where you're at. There was a property years ago, University of Pennsylvania, I think, owns this property back, it's now Brook Drive. There's several old buildings that were housing,
Research.
research. One building in particular was referred to as the Ape House. And a friend of mine was a graduate from Twin Valley High School. He said his first job was at this facility. He said he lasted 3 days in the Ape House. Because he said every time you go in, turn on the light, all of a sudden one of them go boom right into the wall. He said it was just. He said he wasn't only cleaning up theirs, but he's picking up his as well. Okay, on that note. Okay. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Still lots of. I tried to get my sister to go with her.